Hey everybody, welcome back to Matter of Facts. I put up a blog post the other day and it's been on social media. We had a young USPSA competitor that was injured. Some would call it a negligent discharge. I'd characterize this as an accidental discharge because her finger wasn't on the trigger. The firearm itself failed. I've kind of laid out a lot of my thoughts in the blog post, which I'll link in the show description. I think it's important at this point to take a step back and look at, could anything have been done to prevent this? Now, again, I'm not saying she could have or should have done anything differently. Nothing I've read, nothing I've seen leads me to believe that she was negligent in any way. I think that this is one of those situations where we should all take a look at our own, the way we handle our firearms, and maybe try to learn from her unfortunate experience. So this is going to be a couple different videos I'm going to stitch together. I'm going to try not to make it too long. I'm going to bring out several different kinds of firearms. I want to walk y'all through how I function check and therefore safety check firearms. Every time they get disassembled, every time they get cleaned, every time I purchase a new firearm or a used firearm. The first time a firearm comes into my hands, I'm going to assume it's not safe to operate until I prove otherwise. And I'm going to go through how I do that with a bolt-action rifle, a semi-automatic handgun, possibly another semi-automatic handgun because I have a 1911 which is single action, and then I have my Canic which is a double action single action, and a revolver. Now I'm going to lay out what I do to ensure these firearms are operating appropriately, the safeties are all working appropriately, make sure they haven't been monkeyed around with in any way that's going to cause them to be dangerous. And my hope would be that maybe somebody out there takes a moment to look at this and consider, would it be prudent for you to check your own firearms? Try to make them malfunction. Because if they do malfunction, we want it to happen on the bench with no ammunition in them, not sitting in the holster pointed at our leg. So we're gonna try to roll this together. Let me go get my guns and we'll start back up in a second. All right, everybody. Now, like we talked about in the blog post, let's just go ahead and get this out the way. Rifle is clear, nothing in the magazine, nothing in the chamber, and we're pointing in a safe direction. Now, this is my little collection of dummy rounds and snap caps. These little red aluminum ones, which I'm not sure how well you can see that. That is a commercially available snap cap. I think these are a Azu brand. Doesn't matter. It's literally just a piece of aluminum that's modeled to look exactly like a live round. There's no powder in here. There's no projectile. There's no primer. This is completely safe to drop a hammer on all the time. Now these kind of look like live ammo, except I've actually painted the projectiles themselves black, and the primer pockets are filled in with silicone. If I recall correctly, I made this batch when I'd started filling these with sawdust just to make sure the bolt doesn't set back. These are homemade dummy rounds. There's no powder in here, no primer. So you can safely put these into a chamber and drop a firing pin on them and nothing's going to happen. Now, the reason I brought these out is because this is part of what I go through every time I molest any of my firearms. If they get torn down for cleaning, if they go to the gun range and I have any problems at them whatsoever, anytime the firearm comes apart, I function check them to make sure they're working as they're supposed to. In this case, this is a 308 Winchester dummy round I made. Primer pockets filled with silicone, bullets painted black so that I can identify it, no powder inside. Now, what should happen is that round should go into the chamber up out of the magazine like it just did. Chamber just fine. Striker drops when the firing pin is depressed. Now, what's worth pointing out now is that this is the safety. That right there, all the way in the back position, should hook the bolt shut, and it is. In the center position, the bolt should open, but the trigger is disabled. What I'm doing here is I'm ensuring that this safety works like it's supposed to. Now, there's a couple of things going on here. The safety works, it will not allow me to drop up the striker. taking the safety off, striker drops again. But here's something a lot of people don't do that you really should consider doing from this moment forward. The striker's back. I have effectively cocked the firearm, drawn the striker back, the safety is off, it's ready to shoot. That is, in military terms, what we refer to as mortaring a firearm, meaning I'm taking the firearm and I am slamming it down onto a bench. On a rubber butt pad, it's not going to hurt anything. But notice, the striker didn't drop. It shouldn't, it's not supposed to. Now the striker drops. What I'm doing is I'm simulating a drop, and every firearm in existence gets dropped sooner or later. Factory firearms are specifically built, the sears are tuned, everything in this firearm is made to where if you drop it with the striker back, the live round in the chamber, the firearm should not discharge. Therefore, if it's drop safe, it's certainly safe to sit right here with live ammo in the chamber, even though there isn't. What happened to that young lady, unfortunately, is the fact that she had a firearm that apparently on tear it down, the sear had been molested. Therefore, all it took was a slight jarring, and it dropped the striker. It also, the amateur gunsmith work that was done also rendered one of the safeties inoperable. So doing these simple checks is not paranoia, and it's not me just stroking and molesting the firearm, even though I do that. I like my guns. But it's a serious safety check. It's making sure that the safeties are operating properly. It's making sure they're drop safe. It's me making sure they feed and they extract properly. This all goes into make sure that this firearm is as safe as a firearm can be. And I'm asking you to take into consider from now on that when a gun comes into your hands for the first time, meaning you just purchased it new, used, whatever, you just tore the firearm down, it went to the gunsmith and came back, no matter what happens, when the firearm leaves your custody and it comes back to you, consider doing a safety check. Make sure the safeties still work. Make sure it's still drop safe. Many a firearm has been rendered extremely dangerous by some amateurish and overly enthusiastic trigger work that made the gun a little bit too touchy, that made the firearm have that little bit less drop safety than it should have had. And unfortunately, things happen and people get hurt. Now, that's a bolt action gun. The safety, I'm verifying that the safeties work. I mortar the firearm one good at a time to make sure that the striker won't drop. Let's move to something a little bit more modern, like my AK, which is a semi-automatic rifle. All right. Now, empty magazine, nothing in the chamber. We're clear. There are some parts of a function check on a semi-automatic rifle you can do without snap caps, like you can engage the safety and pull the trigger, and you can hear there's nothing going on. That's what should happen. A little bit of trigger movement, honestly, isn't out of the ordinary. Most safeties are not fitted so tightly that you get zero movement, but you should not be able to pull this trigger and get that hammer to drop. If you do, you have a problem. Now, I also have commercially available snap caps in 7.62x39 for doing function checks, like loading into a magazine and ensuring that we're getting accurate, reliable feeding and ejection. But the thing that I want to point out here is the same way we mortared that bolt-action rifle, we can mortar semi-auto as well. Again, I'm trying to simulate a drop. I'm trying to simulate a whoops where a firearm gets knocked off a bench or gets knocked over sideways, and it happens. And you want to ensure that the sear engagement surface between your hammer and trigger is appropriate, not to allow this firearm to discharge unless that trigger is pulled. I mean, it sounds really simple, but it's worth pointing out because apparently a lot of people just assume that, you know, this is my safety, and if I keep my booger hook off the bang switch, it'll never go off. But guys, let's take all the YouTube range officer nonsense put aside for just a second. Firearms are mechanical devices. They fail. They can be modified in such a way that they're no longer safe to operate. So let's all be a little bit mature about this and ensure that our safeties are operating like they're supposed to. Make sure they're drop safe. and make sure that they operate exactly like they're supposed to so that we can ensure we're safe with them. Now, that's rifles out the way. I don't really think there's much between a semi-automatic and a bolt action, except for maybe something like a Thompson Center or a single action hammer-fired rifle, but same theories apply. Make sure that your safeties are operating, make sure they're drop safe. And I'm not suggesting you throw your rifle down the concrete to prove it's drop safe, but mortar it onto a good stiff bench. It should, if you're hitting it on the butt pad, it shouldn't hurt the rifle. Do it with enough authority that you can legitimately say, I simulated a drop test. I mean, a couple little love taps is not going to cut it. Think about how hard a rifle hits the ground when it slips off the side of a bench and slaps down on the ground. You don't want the next thing you hear to be muzzle report when that live round that was in the chamber comes flying out the end because your hammer jumped the sear. So let me put these away, and I'll bring out a couple of handguns. We'll switch the camera position to up high because it's a little bit nicer and easier for doing handguns. And we'll go through those really quickly. This won't take too much longer. All right, now the last of this little subject is going to be handguns. Like we talked about before, these are my commercially purchased snap caps. These are my homemade dummy rounds. There's no live ammo on this bench. Let's just get that out the way. All firearms are clear. Now, with that out the way, these are empty magazines for the magazine-fed firearms. Same thing that we did for the rifles, we're going to do for these handguns. We're going to ensure that they all work appropriately, which means we're going to make sure that they lock open on empty magazine. We're going to make sure that they're feeding and extracting appropriately. Obviously not for the revolver, but doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I guess for this, we can make sure that but the point is, that's how we make sure they're going to feed and extract and they're going to reliably work. How do we make sure they're safe? Well, that's the manual safety, and the hammer will not come down. Safety off, fire, the hammer drops now. On this 1911, manual safety, hammer will not drop. Manual safety off, grip safety will not drop. And on his Ruger, I know what you are thinking, there's no safeties. So how do we make sure the gun's safe? Well, let me show you. Under no circumstances should a revolver ever drop that hammer just from you pressing it forward. You should not be able to get this hammer to do what's called hammer follow by pushing it forward. If somebody's monkeying around with the sear on this firearm, or the trigger, or the hammer, or anything in here, to the point where you can push that hammer and it'll jump the sear and let go, the firearm is no longer safe for use in single action mode, which as far as I'm concerned means it ain't safe to use, period. Because if a gun has to have a big old tag on it saying don't ever pull the hammer back, it might drop on its own, we have problems. These firearms, all their safeties are working appropriately. If we really wanted to drive the point home, the safety's off, the hammer's back, we can give it a couple of good taps, and the hammer's not dropping. That's what we want to see, guys. We want to see that these firearms are all drop safe as the manufacturers intended them. Their safeties work. It takes a deliberate pull of the trigger to get these firearms to release their hammers, drop their strikers, whatever they're doing. We want to ensure that the firearms are operating the way they're supposed to so that these things don't go off in the holster and try to shoot around right through our friggin' calf. This is hopefully an ounce of prevention to prevent everyone here a pound of cure. Every time these firearms come apart, they get function checked, and therefore they get safety checked. Because I've disassembled and reassembled these firearms, with the exception of this one, because it's my newest one, quite a few times. But even I am capable of screwing something up, and I'd rather find out about it on the bench before I find out about it in the holster. So let me know what y'all think in the comments. Is this overkill? Do I maybe have a point? Am I telling you something you haven't considered before? Are you thinking maybe you need to look again making some dummy rounds or purchasing snap caps? These you can pick up on Amazon cheap. You can get them in most gun stores cheap. And for those of you that reload, take a wild guess how I made these. Cases, bullets, no primer, powder, easy. But I recommend that you all consider what I've shown you today. Take a look at every firearm in your collection and run it through these basic checks with no live ammunition in the firearm. Make sure that they operate the way you expect them to. And please be careful out there, because as someone found out recently, just because you are exercising good gun handling, just because your finger isn't on the trigger, doesn't mean a firearm can't go off if it's been tampered with. Take this as an ounce of prevention, people. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Don't forget to subscribe. Look at my blog post, which will also be linked into the comments, and talk to me. Tell me what you think about what I presented, and in the future we'll probably have a few more tabletop reviews on this Ruger GP100 and this Kimber 1911, because I haven't shown all these yet. Or the AK, or quite frankly a few firearms in my collection that need to come out and need to make an appearance. But I'll wrap this up, keep it short. I hope I gave y'all something to think about, and I'll talk to y'all next time.